This week on Jerusalem Dateline, Israel reopens to individual tourists and businessmen and women as long as you follow the rules. What do Israelis think about that? And Israel passes a budget and avoids new elections. Plus, the story behind the declaration that paved the way for the establishment of the modern state of Israel. All this and more this week on Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. If you've been waiting like many others to visit Israel, now's your chance. As CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl tells us, the welcome mat is out if you follow all the rules.
Israel's borders are now open to individual tourists and business people, provided they are fully vaccinated with a recognized vaccine.
Today is an important day, especially for Jerusalem.
Jerusalem Deputy Mayor Fleur Hassan Nahum says that's because tourism represents about 30% of the city's economy, with hotels being its biggest employer.
I think there is a cautious optimism. I think most people are waiting to see what's going to happen. Nobody's running here yet.
Rules to enter include being fully vaccinated or recovered from COVID within the last 6 months, or having an exceptional entry permit, no time spent in a red country 2 weeks prior to arrival, taking a PCR test up to 72 hours before boarding the plane, and another PCR test upon arrival, waiting in isolation until notification of negative results, travel insurance, and anyone breaking the rules could be banned from Israel for up to 5 years. Hassan Nahum sees some problems with the plan. She notes most countries don't have a third booster yet, and it's not clear whether unvaccinated children will be allowed in.
This is not open skies. This is partial opening. Many people will be able to get here, but many people still may not.
In June, the tourism ministry tried out a pilot program allowing in small groups of vaccinated tourists. Thousands have visited since then, mostly from the U.S. and Europe. The plan had been to allow vaccinated individuals to enter the country beginning in July, but that was postponed after a fourth surge in COVID cases.
We opened for a very short period in July when we hoped that the business will come back, but unfortunately it didn't happen at the time in July.
Now things are looking up.
We have quite a few groups coming in the next few weeks.
Some 4.5 million tourists visited Israel in 2019. The hope for that trend to continue went away when COVID hit, closing travel worldwide. While hotels here have been closed for the last year and a half, David Tucker, chairman of the Jerusalem Hotel Association, sees tourism making a comeback.
I believe in 2022, we'll start seeing more and more groups. I do hope that 2023, we will be back to what we saw in 2019. You see the heart at the back of my picture, and it's a big heart, and we're waiting for everybody back.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
In addition to opening the door to tourism, Israel's Knesset members passed the country's first budget in 3 years. The vote was crucial, since if they didn't pass the budget by law, the country would go to new elections. Earlier, CBN News senior editor John Waggy and CBN News Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl joined me in our Jerusalem studio to talk more about the implications of the budget passage, as well as other issues affecting Israel and the Middle East. John and Julie, thanks for joining me on this roundtable. John, first to you. The Bennett government has been in office now for several months and passed its first major hurdle by passing the budget in the Knesset. Tell us, what do you think is the status of this government? And also tell us what you think about right now, what's happening with opposition leader Benjamin Netanyahu.
They've succeeded in clearing this big hurdle, which is the budget. But the problem is that now they're going to face each other. And this is a widely disparate group in the coalition, ranging from an Arab party that doesn't even want the existence of Israel on paper and a right-wing settlers group. So you have run the gamut, and the government is celebrating. They're celebrating because they needed this to avoid new elections right away, but it doesn't mean that they're not entering probably the most challenging time, and it doesn't mean that the government can't fall. As far as Benjamin Netanyahu goes, the last poll I saw had Likud with 36 seats compared to, 30 that they have now. He's only rising in authority, but it's this is an add-on for the current government, that they may survive another several months.
Yeah, Julie, two of the issues that really have put the Bennett coalition and the Biden administration at odds has been, one, the U.S. consulate. They want to reintroduce that here in Jerusalem, and also settlements, housing units in Judea and Samaria. How do you see the Bennett and the Biden administration resolving these two issues?
Well, Chris, the Prime Minister Bennett, when he first was elected, he said he was going to, try to have a new kind of relationship with Washington, and he was going to be super friendly, and everything was going to be great. But you can see already there's a strain on the relations there. First of all, with the consulate, that's quite a big deal. It's very subtle. The Palestinian Affairs Unit of the embassy has been housed in the same building continuously, but what they're doing is talking about removing it from under the authority of the ambassador to Israel and just giving the Palestinians their own consulate in Western Jerusalem. So it's a very subtle move, but basically it's kind of like unrecognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Also on the settlements, putting new housing units in there it's a normal thing. It's community growth. So it's not like they're putting houses out in the middle of nowhere in a Palestinian's backyard. So there's definitely a friction growing there.
John, a final question to you, and perhaps the main issue between the U.S. administration and the Bennett government will be the situation with the Iranian nuclear deal. There's a date set, November 29th, when they're going to start renegotiating that deal. How do you see that playing out between the U.S. and Israel? That represents an existential threat to Israel. How do you see them going forward with this?
That's a tough one, Chris. The Biden administration is going to do what it's going to do. It's essentially a globalist agenda. They want to rejoin the European UN-related effort to harness Iran through diplomacy. That, according to the Netanyahu doctrine, didn't work. And Netanyahu made that clear. He's in the background. President Trump agreed with Netanyahu. He's in the background in the United States. So just how much freedom and leeway is the Biden administration going to have? And I think moderate Democrats are going to have to decide which side of the fence they're on if this does truly present an existential threat to Israel, which there's no reason to believe that it doesn't.
Well, John, that's one major issue that we'll be looking forward to and covering in the days and weeks to come. John and Julie, thanks for joining me on this roundtable about what's happening here in Israel and the region. Coming up, what do Israelis think about the Green Pass and tourists returning to Israel? It's called a Tav Yarok or Green Pass, and it allows those who have one to access restaurants and other venues, as well as travel abroad more freely. The passes are given to those who are vaccinated against the coronavirus, or a temporary pass after a PCR or quick test. Some say such a system exerts too much government control and limits freedoms. We went to Jerusalem's Mahane Yehuda market to ask what Israelis think about the Green Pass, as well as tourists returning to Israel.
The Tav Yarok, the Green Pass, what do you think? Do you think there's too much control going on with that? Do you think it's a good thing, a bad thing?
No, the Tav Yarok is a good thing. It's one of the reasons why Israel is returning to a normal routine, and many other countries are following suit in using Israel as a good model.
Difficult to say, honestly, because everybody wants to be healthy, and we want to fight with Corona, of course, but there is too many restrictions, in my opinion. If you can come to drink a coffee only with green passport, it's not okay.
It's forbidden that politics will prevail over common sense. Common sense says you need to get vaccinated, you need to be careful. Green Pass, yes, of course, we need to keep these things.
The government's role is to protect the citizenry, and we all sacrifice our freedoms for the sake of all kinds of different things, and I'm all in favor of it.
For me, it's actually doesn't matter. I don't so care about this. I don't visit the restaurants all the time.
Shameful. In French, they call it a Nazi pass, and I believe it's a Nazi pass. It's a fascist. They are using this coronavirus to install a dictator in the world. it's also so obvious that I don't understand that people don't see it.
They don't know what the left hand does. The right hand doesn't know what the left hand does in this country. So I don't have what to say about it. Every day they're changing. One day this, one day that.
I think it's annoying, but we should have it till the corona will pass over.
The tourists are coming back. What do you think?
It's amazing. Israel is a lovely country. There is a lot to see and experience and enjoy. So, of course, they are welcome.
I think the time has come for them to return with the restrictions, the serological tests, the vaccines, and the masks. That's it. We will learn to live with this for many years. It's not over. What are we going to do? Close the world? Put on a mask, take the vaccine, and be careful.
But as a resident of Jerusalem, I would be lying if I didn't say I really enjoyed the ability to visit the Old City and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and the Western Wall and not be mobbed by endless amounts of tourists. And I've also noticed that the air was cleaner during this whole period. There weren't buses coming and going and whatnot. So, I mean, obviously, you know, the city relies on the tourist industry, and I'm glad that they're coming back and taking all the proper precautions and whatnot, but it was nice while when they were gone. I really enjoyed the city a lot more when it was all for me, you know, but I'm not selfish, so.
It's very difficult not to have tourists here. I have friends and family that want to come, and now that the restrictions are being eased, it hopefully will be much, much easier for tourists.
I think the country should be open to everyone, to tourists and to everyone who wants to come, and stop with this coronavirus that they are using.
Like I told you, the right hand doesn't know what the left hand does, and the tourists bring so much money and so much good things to Israel, so I don't understand why they are making their lives so hard.
Of course, Israel is a beautiful country with a lot of things to see. Jerusalem, Eilat, Tiberia. We have a lot of מקומות קדושים. How do you say it? Holy places, yes. Good weather, good people. So come.
Up next, marking the anniversary of the Balfour Declaration that paved the way for the establishment of the State of Israel. During World War I, the British government made a public statement that it supported the establishment of a, quote, national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. It's known as the Balfour Declaration, and it paved the way for the establishment of the State of Israel. Here's a clip from CBN's documentary, The Hope, chronicling that historic moment.
On November 2nd, 1917, the British government issued a letter that promised the Jewish people their first homeland in nearly 2,000 years. And with just 67 words, the map of the world changed forever.
His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country.
David Lloyd George had been raised in a deeply religious home in Wales, where he had studied the history of the Jewish people. He had become convinced of their right to return to their biblical homeland, and often spoke of putting Israel back on the map and providing a national hearth and a refuge for the hunted children of Israel. During World War I, Lloyd George became Britain's first Minister of Munitions, and in this capacity, he met a scientist who shared his dream of a Jewish homeland. At the height of World War I, Great Britain experienced a critical shortage of acetone, the chemical needed to create the explosive in artillery cartridges. So a Jewish chemist in Manchester went to work and came up with a new way to create acetone by fermenting grain, corn, and even chestnuts. He worked day and night to reproduce it in mass quantities, and soon the British were producing 90,000 gallons a year. The chemist who saved the British Army was a Russian Jewish man named Chaim Weizmann, a Zionist leader who would one day become the first president of the State of Israel. In Manchester, Weizmann made a number of strategic friendships with members of the British government. During the war, he worked with Lloyd George to solve the munitions crisis. And nearly a decade earlier, he had met a former prime minister who became a lifelong friend. Lord Arthur James Balfour was born in eastern Scotland, and like David Lloyd George, his childhood was steeped in the stories of the Bible. After several years as a member of Parliament, Balfour became Prime Minister in 1902. While in office, he supported the plan for a Jewish homeland in Uganda. A few years later, a friend introduced him to Chaim Weizmann of Manchester University, and the two debated the merits of the Uganda scheme for more than an hour.
But the Russian Jews need a safe haven immediately. Why not British East Africa?
The survival of Zionism is based on a spiritual conviction, and that conviction is based on Palestine, and on Palestine alone. If Moses had been here when they had proposed Uganda, he would surely have broken the tablets once again. Mr. Balfour, supposing I were to offer you Paris instead of London, would you take it?
But Dr. Weizmann, we have London.
That is true. And we had Jerusalem when London was nothing more than a marsh.
Are there many Jews who think like you?
I believe I speak the mind of millions of Jews who cannot speak for themselves.
If that is so, Dr. Weizmann, then you will one day be a force.
Lord Balfour had gone into the meeting hoping to change Weizmann's mind, but instead, he became the convert, and the Jewish people gained an ally in one of the most powerful men in England. On November 2nd, 1917, the final letter, signed by Balfour, was sent to Lord Rothschild. A week after that, it was published in newspapers around the world. Leaflets of the text were then airdropped over Jewish communities in Germany, Austria, and parts of Russia. But it would be another 3 decades after the Balfour Declaration before the Jews would have their state.
The Jews needed a home in which to survive, and they fought to achieve it. And sometimes they fought against the British to achieve it. The Balfour Declaration was an opening, but it was the Jews who kept the promise of the Balfour Declaration, not the British. It was the Jews who made it happen.
Still ahead, Sabina, tortured for Christ, the Nazi years. A new film on the enduring love that overcame the horrors of the Holocaust. Richard and Sabina Wurmbrand were young, in love, and Jewish when World War II hit. In his new film, Sabina, filmmaker John Gruders brings the true story of Sabina Wurmbrand, who found an enduring love that went beyond the horrors of the Holocaust. Take a look.
I want the same things every girl wants. And then a little bit more.
I want you to meet someone.
Oh.
He's every bit as ambitious as you.
Who's this?
She is my niece, Sabina Oster.
My mother is nagging me to get married. She's even picked out a girl.
That sounds very nice for you. And what do you think?
I think my mother should ask me that question.
Your mother's gonna kill me.
SS came looking for you today. I'm not hiding. And you should.
Sind Sie Sabina Wurmband?
We can get you to the border if we leave now.
You know this is ridiculous.
I'm collecting all the verses in the Bible that tell us not to be afraid. I think I might need to lead on all of them. If we stay, I'll follow the others into prison. It will be the end of our life together.
Whosoever will save his life shall lose it. And whosoever will lose his life for my sake shall find it. We believe this or we don't. I think we have to stay. We have a job to do.
Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.